Welcome to the final session of today at the Slovenian Pavilion at COP28 in collaboration with MCH Global and Future Blockchain Summit. It is a very special conversation we'll be having today with my close friends, Fernando Garibay and David Chaum, that I've gotten to know in this past year. Both are geniuses and have had a greater impact in the world than most can realize. Fernando Garibay is a super producer and a polymath. He produced Lady Gaga's first 3 albums. Most significantly, Born This Way. He won a Grammy Award for that, and it has influenced Western society for better or worse ever since. Less impressively, he also produced Enrique Iglesias, Bailando, and Paris Hilton's Stars Are Born. Stars Are Blind. Also a massive impact on modern day society. Today he's working with soft diplomacy and soft power, using music as a way of communication and influence. We were just talking before going on stage how the music industry has revenues of only 40 billion or so odd dollars, which represents roughly the ad spend of Procter & Gamble, while gaming is multiples of that, but doesn't have much of an influence in broader society. Music can really set trends, set attitudes, and that is what Fernando Garibay is all about. He works with multiple governments around the world. I was with him in Davos in the desert a few weeks ago, and he works with religious groups, and he works with corporations and connects them with artists for soft power. And I think in this day and age, we truly need that. Now we're coming to David Chaum, the legend, the man, the mystery. He's been staying with me now for 10 days, which is an adventure. Every morning when we wake up. David is the inventor of the blockchain in the early 80s. He has invented the blockchain to the extent that everything that is blockchain, except for proof of work, is his work from his thesis at Berkeley in the early 80s. That's what he's most famous for, but he has also invented blind signatures, which is the basis of modern voting and voting machines. And his research also led to the darknet and the Tor network in its concept. Today, he is working with 2 projects, most significantly, that we'll be talking about today. One is called Better Than Money, which is a transaction platform for commodity platforms, for commodity wallets to exchange instantly. And the other, which David very generously calls me a co-founder, is Astro Cool. That is really the main topic for today. It is about mining moon dust to disperse in space to shield Earth from the sun. Very fascinating project. We were in Germany earlier this year to launch it at the Deutsches Museum, the science museum there. And we're talking now to the German government about funding, and we're in very advanced stages. And as you'll find in this conversation today, is that it is not as fantastical or as science fiction as it first sounds, but it is very realistic and has many exciting externalities. So now that I've set the stage, I would like to hand over to my co-moderator here, Fernando, to explore the mystery that is David Chaum.
Thank you so much. What an honor. I'm very inspired by your work, David. I followed you for quite a bit and trying to decipher who is Satoshi. And in that process led me to you, obviously, like many of us have. But I don't think people realize the significance of the impact you've had on humanity. So you laid down the infrastructure and pipeline for everything digital, from moving from the late 70s to onwards, right? So everyone has touched a piece of your influence and has been influenced by what you've done with your white papers and your legacy. My focus and specialty these days happens to be creativity as a catalyst for growth and we're here looking at catalyzing new ecosystems. But you're the father. You have a framework for this, and you pioneered. You wrote the book on establishing ecosystems in the digital realm. Can you talk about what inspired you first to get to this point?
Well, I was a grad student at Berkeley, and those days in the late 70s, most of the funding for graduate students was from the military, DARPA and the Department of the Navy and the Army and Air Force and other agencies of the U.S. government. And, it's kind of in stark contrast to kind of the ethos that was, down there in Sproul Plaza, where the free speech movement had, prevailed. And so, I really started thinking about what information technology could mean for the future of, civilization and it became clear to me pretty quickly that the essential thing that was going to determine whether people would be dominated by information technology or whether information technology would allow humanity to sort of, maintain its own integrity and prosper at the same time was whether people could, as individuals, use cryptography to protect their interest in an informational world. Because, if you can't protect your own privacy, you have to rely on governments and corporations to protect your privacy. You can't really be sure they're doing it, and probably they won't do it, or something will leak out. And so that's not an effective mechanism to empower people to feel like they're really have their interests protected. So it became overwhelmingly clear to me that cryptography was necessary, and that certain, inventions and innovation were needed to, because cryptography traditionally, I don't want to give too long an answer, but was used by militaries to protect message content. It's a very simple, straightforward use. The sender encrypts the message. Little kids do this, right? Send it over to someone and they can decrypt it and read it. But actually, when you start looking into it, it turns out that in those contexts, much more is learned about who is talking to whom and when and how much than is ever learned by really breaking the codes and reading the messages. And part of the reason is because people can mislead others by making stuff up in those messages.
When I hear you speak, I can't help but think about the Stanford days of the 70s, right? There were still protests, and you are working with the government and trying to decipher, because I would imagine there were ones that would sponsor your grants to get to this extent of, because at that point in time, no one even thought the internet would be really possible. That was like over their heads, right? Yes. And so you went from the Turing machine in the 20s to now to the 70s, trying to, I would imagine, try to get support for this new world.
Well, I think there was a very brief period where I was getting some money from the Air Force for some crazy thing that I was working on, but it was very brief. I never met the Air Force people or anything. I was working for this one professor, but very briefly. Mainly, I had a 4-year graduate fellowship from the Regents of the University of California. They only gave one every 2 years to computer science, and I had one. So I didn't really have, any kind of external funding. I guess, significantly. So I was kind of free to work on what I wanted to work on, and So I was doing something very contrary to what most of my peers were doing.
The challenge, and what I'm going to draw, hopefully with Oscar here, is this thread. This is a conference of sustainability, and outlining what sustainability factors are, and the race towards clarifying those sustainability factors, and then creating the right incentives between the banking system and traditional incentive mechanisms to inspire people to do better and support this community's one world ideology. So you've trailblazed and pioneered a new ethos into the world of a different way of communicating. What were the challenges, and what can we learn from you about crossing that chasm from this ideation to innovation, to adoption, then to normalization?
Well, one lesson learned is that actually, in the digital realm and with cryptography, the mechanisms are very cut and dry, to say the least. It's all with bits, and so there isn't a lot of risk or uncertainty about how to do things. So if you design something as a result of just coming up with the idea, then you can deploy it, and it will just keep working forever. It's a lot easier to go from an idea to a practical, actual application and use in the digital domain than in let's say physics or chemistry or social sciences. But still, I think this is Fernando, we experience the same sort of thing. If it's really about getting the idea out there, the meme, I'd say the story,
Yeah. So it's interesting. You're hitting my button, so I can't help but to reciprocate with that and give you my perspective. The challenge is when you're, especially we've heard a lot of new companies coming out trying to introduce new mechanisms to identify what is truly from scope 1, 2, and 3, right? What is the impact, complexity, impact on the world, and how to measure this through scale degrees to achieve a certain advantage, right, to better reciprocate these initiatives. When doing something extraordinary and new, it requires a lot of creativity, and not just creativity. It's multiple versions of this, right? You have creative science, you have creative economics, and you have creative in the traditional sense of art. And creativity is the disparate connections between totally unrelated things and creating these new pathways towards a convergence point in which you'll have a new idea, and then when you can actuate the idea into the real world. Most of us can do that, but what you've done is present something that never really existed, and a working model of this, and put it into a white paper, and then be able to execute that to support when no one probably understood what you were talking about.
Well, you're right. You're reminding me. It's not been a simple process. It's been challenging, and having the insight that the world really needs something totally unexpected and undeveloped, like cryptography, set me on a course of having to create innovations that would prove out the effectiveness of it in a way that ordinary people could understand it and appreciate it, and that's difficult. And then there's a communication aspect to this also, to try to write stuff like that up or explain it. Most scientists try to make this stuff really hard to understand, of course, and so that but like medical doctors speaking, what is it, Latin or something? I don't know, but I had to try to do the exact opposite and really find actually analogies to things that people have experienced in ordinary life, and speak about these new mechanisms in those terms as if they were the most natural, obvious sorts of things, in order to really get people to accept these ideas. So that was a whole effort in and of itself.
You've shared the story so many times about when you did the conference in '82 that almost put you in jail when the CIA threatened you. And yesterday you shared more details. I was walking down the street here in COP28 and I said, "You're a genius, David. I'm just saying that you've already, like 30 years ago, acted on what I was saying." So anyway, now moving forward.
Let's do that.
So I think this is a key point, and we can pick something up from this that's extraordinarily valuable. To do anything this extraordinary, you must be super hyper creative and use whatever you have to build incentive structures that inspire people. And what people don't realize is that you really have to go where no one's thinking. What would inspire your constituents or potential constituents to do something and get involved? And I think there's a lesson to be learned about this process, right? Like being really creative with how you inspire people, especially early adopters. And that's I think what maybe perhaps would be the alternative way of asking that question.
Well, riffing off this much more acceptable avenue, there's something called the cypherpunks movement, and I see a lot of most people in the room are aware of this, and it was a very powerful influence on the evolution of society. It was just a small activist group of a few dozen people who were inspired by the idea that cryptography could be used to protect privacy in the digital realm. And they took it upon themselves to organize and create kind of acts of civil disobedience, in effect, by promulgating, illicit software to protect privacy and so forth. And to a large extent, I think, according to what I've read and what I understand, this group was inspired by the fact. Okay, let me just go there. I'm not trying to take credit for what they've done, but I just want to point out that if someone hadn't done the hard work that I did to figure out all the ways that cryptography could be used to really protect privacy of who talks to whom and when, and in electronic payments, then that whole movement probably would have lacked quite a bit of inspiration. I mean, there was, another thread to it, which was just simply the basic cryptography thing, but it's kind of hard to get really enthusiastic.
So what's the
about
ethos of the original cyberpunk movement, cypherpunk movement, and now there's cypherpunk 2.0?
Well, once again, Oscar, you're speaking out of school, but yeah, that's not yet been announced, but we are working on a concept like that. There's a few people that we're collaborating to try. It's a very different world, and back then this was a very kind of exclusive activist group of coders, and you couldn't really be admitted unless you could write this software and were willing to write the software and so forth. And nowadays, everybody kind of empathizes with this sentiment that computers maybe know too much about us or will be knowing too much, and this is not really a good thing. And so, yeah, today maybe everybody is a bit of a cypherpunk 2.0. But I'm.
But then again, like, everything is known about us and we don't care. Like, to such a great extent, cryptography is more needed now than ever before, and it's more of a greater threat to democracy, to freedom of speech, but we just don't really make an effort to hide our communication.
Well, so this. I think there's certainly an aspect of truth in that. But what you leave out is the causality, because it's really, if you don't have a choice, then you don't have a choice. So one good thing about the whole blockchain movement, and a lot of people here are involved in this, is we're trying to create those choices, so a Web3 version of everything that people can just sort of opt into. And but if there's no such option, yeah, of course people are.
We were primed with this idea of this incentive structure of low barrier to entry and convenience, right?
Yeah.
Essentially, and over time, there's an evolution of this Darwinian evolution aspect to this, right? So that we've conditioned society to understand this as part of daily norm to give out your information. So when you do that, this trade-off has been set already across our civilization. So now the question is, how, in your philosophy and your theory, because you have extreme insight on this, how do you see a way forward with Web3 and blockchain technology to protect who you are?
Well, once the options are available to the public, I mean, they will seize on them. I was just reading today that there's almost 1 billion users of Telegram. That's a large fraction of the global population, and it may not be the handiest and feature-rich, most easy-to-use system, but there's a lot of users of it. So I think that kind of speaks volume. If there's a way to do it, people will use it. And what I'm hoping for would be like a second-order effect, where people who don't really feel the need to use it for their own benefit use it to provide, we say cover for, those who do. And if we reach that tipping point, then, I think we will have won.
So let's move on to Astro Cool.
Okay, so Astro Cool is a project that was announced several months ago at the Deutsche Museum at the Festival of the Future, translated from the German, and it is involving about 6 or 8 people. And I'm the leader of it, and everybody else in the project has more business being there maybe than I do. But although I did invent this crazy idea, which is, and I believe I'm the first person on the planet to have thought of it, and it is simply that, the moon is covered in dust, and it's 5 to 15 meters deep, moon dust. And, because it is hit by meteors and asteroids, or whatever you want to call them, for billions of years, it's been pulverized into this very fine dust. And it turns out that, of course, the finer the dust, the more effective it is per kilo or per pound at blocking light, right? Boulders are very ineffective at blocking light per kilo, but a very fine powder, because it goes as the square of the surface area. So it's a way to cool the Earth back to pre-industrial levels would be to bring enough dust from the moon to what's called variously the Lagrange point, the L1. It's just the gravity balance point between the sun and the Earth. And since the sun is very big compared to the Earth, the gravity force balance point is much closer to the Earth. It's 1 million miles from Earth, and it's 99 million miles from the sun. And so if you put dust there, it will block sunlight that's heading to the Earth 24/7. It just stays there, and as the Earth spins, it continues to block, and as the Earth goes around the sun, it just stays there. Now, it doesn't stay there forever, which is a kind of mixed blessing. People are, there's a concern. Obviously, you put dust there and it never goes away, and maybe that's a bad thing. So the good news is that it will go away for sure within 6 months, because it's like trying to balance, an orange on top of a beach ball. You can put it there very carefully, but eventually it will fall off. And this is a physics fact. So on the other hand, we have spent a lot of effort to try to make it so that the dust stays there for a good while. And we've developed special orbits that are near that location where we think we can get it to stay for pretty much the maximum amount of time. And that's, something we want to test out experimentally within the scope of our, very attainable objectives, near-term objectives for the project. But there's another issue, is like, how do you get all that dust there? And it's a lot of dust.
Yeah, and to put this project in context, there are many competing projects about shielding Earth from the sun using sails, and if you could just outline what other initiatives are out there and how this is more.
I try to really innovate my way out of being involved in any kind of horse race. I just hate that. But fortunately, in this case, it's not really like, it's not like a lot of competing projects that are competing in our space. Exactly. In the sense, yeah.
So I agree with that. Go ahead.
Well, let me just clarify that for the audience just real quick, that most of the stuff you hear about is people want to put stuff, on the surface of the Earth or very near in the clouds or in the, low Earth orbit, and that stuff will all come down onto the Earth, and that's a scientific fact, and so this could cause problems, and that's why the public really doesn't want to see that type of solution. So the beautiful thing about putting stuff a million miles away from the Earth is it's a million miles away from the Earth, as we say. That's an expression for it. It's like, and it will never come here. You can put a 10-meter boulder a million miles from Earth, send it to Earth at whatever speed you want, and it'll burn up before it gets here.
That's right. So set this up for us to better understand this. I love this idea. In the entrepreneurial world, there's this term called loon shots, and very intelligent people are looking to invest in things that are just so extraordinary, comic book like, right? So give us the science behind this and why moon dust specifically is sustainable.
You just have to look at I put a lot of effort into this. And so I started with the concept of moving asteroids from the asteroid belt or near the asteroids to that location and possibly pulverizing them. And in physics, one of the ways you look at possibilities is one of the most telling kinds of analysis is just energy analysis. How much energy does it take to do that? And that's really, easy to calculate for astrophysics. So it takes an unbelievable amount of energy to move asteroids to that location. And then if you think about it, to turn an asteroid into dust, it's not easily done. And then to further complicate that dust might have some momentum resulting from the process of turning it to dust, and that would send it away from where we need it. So it's just really hard to do. So I'm afraid I don't want to go into the best way that I know of to do this right now, because I think that we have to save that for another day. But we have a way to do it that's very efficient and makes very parsimonious use of the rocket infrastructure. So we can probably get enough dust there with maybe like a dozen rockets, which is like nothing like if you were in this room 24 hours ago, people were talking, they were saying, McKinsey says we need to spend $10 trillion a year to mediate, climate change. That's, no. So
they just need to give us $1 trillion and we'll get it done.
Yeah, well, they have a little bit of a profit on that because, those rockets aren't that expensive. I think the SpaceX, what did they say? It's like 50 million, 20 million for one of those rockets. So, I mean, we a minimal number of rockets, and then there's the issue of the rocket fuel. Now, which is really, you think of it in terms of energy, but there's something that in the space community, is referred to as the cislunar economy. So, a number of major countries have band together with this effort to, get back to the moon and do all this stuff and to support the cislunar economy idea. It's very simple. Governments can't keep paying for all this space stuff. They want some kind of economic activity to be taking place around the Earth and the moon. That's what they mean by cislunar. And so, as a sort of staging place for missions to Mars and elsewhere. There's just a lot of emphasis on needing ways to refuel rockets or nuclear-powered rockets. Now, that sounds really awful. I don't think you'd want to stand out here at the conference and talk about nuclear-powered rockets, but If you're doing it from the moon, it's very different because that's pretty far away, and if something bad happens, it's not really going to affect people that much. But nuclear rockets, they can be extremely great for moving dust because you don't have to keep creating all this fuel for them. It's just a fusion would be like super ideal. So NASA is actually just in the process of testing fission-based rockets, and so it's, as you may know, with DARPA, and so it's not science fiction. There's a lot of work in this, and if you want to get really into deep space, you're going to need stuff like that. So what we're saying in the Astro Cool project is, just to kind of tie this out to the practical reality of the objectives of the short-term objectives of the project. Okay, what we're planning to do is put up some CubeSats, which is a very low cost, very already heavily done sort of a thing. The small satellites that where you hitch a ride with others and spit out some dust and video it and make sure that it's doing what we think it should do, and then try to get one of those up to where we really want to place it and put the dust the way we want to place it. We have one of the leading astrophysicists and trajectory designers and firms working with us and so forth. And we have designed these orbits, and we're going to put it there and see if it really stays there like we expect, and do experiments with moon dust particle size, because moon dust is actually not uniform, and different portions of the moon have different kinds of dust, and they have different light blocking properties and so on. So we need to do some experiments. So why all this? Because look, it takes years to do experiments like that. You can't just put this microphone in space. You have to qualify it, test it, make sure it's not going to wreck the rest of the spacecraft, and so forth and so on. So it's a whole very slow, extensive process of vetting this stuff. And so we need to get this work done and find out what's really best. And that may take some iteration. So it may take several years to really figure out how this moon dust can best be deployed to cool the planet. And maybe we'll find out there's something wrong and we can't do it. I don't know. But we need to do this work, start this work now, so that in case something goes wrong and civilization starts to literally, melt down, or there's some really bad human consequences for this global warming that manifest themselves, we know how we can mediate that with this technology. So this
you call it a Plan X in case there's a climate emergency.
Yeah. So, but you can't, if you don't do this work now, if the crisis happens, you'll be very far away from being able to figure out what to do. And so we have to get this figured out. I saw fire extinguishers in the building. I mean, you better design the fire extinguishers before you really need them. Let's put it that way. And that's what we're doing. And the cost of doing this is extremely modest. And, when you start showing videos of dust in space and it actually working, that can do a lot to convince the general public that this is viable and, comprehensible. And, in the business that we're all in here at this event of trying to make sure the world stays more habitable, that is a portion of our work, is to communicate what we're doing and what the solutions are effectively, get the public to appreciate them and support them.
We should get the Rockettes.
And also, don't forget that the whole advocacy community itself is, in many cases, part of the problem, because there's a lot of infighting. It's like they...
But don't you think there are a lot of other benefits from mining on the moon?
Oh, yes. And so it's kind of a mercenary question, but no, really, there was a boom in space exploration and mining for asteroids and the moon a few years ago. Tremendous amount of investment was made in it. And it turns out, of course, that with Astro Cool, we have to harvest an awful lot of moon dust and pack it in these plastic things and send it. And, probably there's a lot of very interesting elements in there that we can sift out. Like
What do you
gold,
think might be there?
platinum. There's various radioactive isotopes that are really ideal for fusion power and so on. And there's also water and so if it is a lot of valuable stuff. Having a way to produce water on the moon is extremely valuable because it's very expensive to bring it there from Earth. And you can make rocket fuel, conventional rocket fuel from it. And of course, you need it to make oxygen for people to live on and so forth and so on. So there's just all kinds of, we don't really know what all is we're going to find in there. So someone may say, oh, Astro Cool, that's very expensive. Well, it's not going to be $10 trillion a year, like McKinsey says. So it's a lot cheaper actually than a lot of stuff that's discussed around here. And it can bring us back 2 degrees, back to pre-industrial levels if we want to do it. But it might actually, produce a net profit. It might not actually cost society anything. We may actually benefit from it. So it's we don't know.
Well,
it's pretty exciting.
I personally love this maybe even like 3 or 4 years ago, you present this to a 500 startups and it'd be like, what are you talking about? But now you look at the urgency, right? I think this created a window to now really explore opportunities like this for investment, but true action, right? So, this community can get lost essentially sometimes with the incentive structures and providing incentive structures and the competition for those incentive structures and identifying those incentive structures. But what's refreshing for me is the actual craziness of this wild idea that you have to potentially pick up some moon dust and put it and spread it around our Earth orbit. But and it's really potential. Like there's a lot of potential in this, and that's inspiring me. What's even more inspiring is your willingness to put this forward, show the science, and then try to attain feasibility and viability for people to participate in more projects like this.
Well, thanks a lot. Yeah, you are kind of putting yourself at risk of receiving a lot of very unfriendly communication from good intentioned advocates because people maybe think that if you could solve the climate change problem without changing the whole lifestyle of everyone on the planet, then they won't change the lifestyle, and that's wrong or something. There's a lot of very convoluted arguments that occur, and I don't want to spend my time, debating this sort of thing. I think that everyone in the space has the best of intentions, but there is a tendency among advocacy groups to paint things with very broad brushes, and this is unfortunate. But I think that what we're doing in the Astro Cool is just like saying, okay, we want to do a very limited practical test, see, could you really make a fire extinguisher out of this kind of stuff, and see if it works and show it to the public. And that's something it's kind of hard to object to.
Yeah, I believe in complexity and solutions within complexity, system level thinking. And without a doubt, the economic infrastructures that are starting to flourish and starting to, essentially scale out are important because it's part of the ecosystem, right? It's just tracking those incentives is key to fund projects like one of these projects, right? You might get the right adopting funding for this, so that's important.
We're getting good support, and I think it is a moment in time for this sort of thing. But one thing about the environmental movement, of course, I think many people are aware of, is that it's been known for many decades that we were on this collision course with destruction of life on the planet, and the thing is that policymakers and governments and and just ordinary people are often very reluctant to, try to solve a problem that hasn't really manifested itself in a very threatening way yet.
Yeah.
And so working on these solutions has, perpetually been put off. And this is kind of what's brought us to this bad situation we're in. And the thing about Astro Cool that I really like, and if you look at astrocool.com, which I heard today may be slightly off the air at the moment, but it's not supposed to be, you will see that there's another component to Astro Cool, and that is the digital privacy and cryptography component. And that is what I call Seventh Estate. It's a way to have a grassroots democracy. I call it guerrilla voting, guerrilla democracy. And so just for if you have $1,000 and a weekend to spend stuffing envelopes, you can prove irrefutably that a majority of people on that mailing list, which could be a very large list for a whole country, would support a specific proposition that you ask about. Well, let me say this, and that complete the thought. And so that is actually a part of the Astro Cool project, is to, once we get the objective proof that this can work, to ask the global population, hey, what do you think? Should society invest in actually building these rockets and seeing, getting ready to do it? And if that, if that vote is yes, then I think there could be a great change in the atmosphere of society. It would be a pulling together of the public instead of this fractionation that we're witnessing, and people would say, we have the power, we're pulling together to save the planet, and we're deciding that we should do this. And that's part of the broader Astro Cool vision that I find extremely
There's a
exciting.
quote from John Sinclair that goes, "You cannot make a man understand what his paycheck depends on him not understanding." And I mean, with carbon markets and carbon trading and the whole climate change industry, there's a lot of money to be made, especially from banking. And what I love about you, David, is that you destroy industries. That's your other project that we didn't have a chance to talk about yet, the Better Than Money. But when you look at Astro Cool, if it would work, and it's not as complicated and difficult, it may not be that complicated.
We'll find out and we'll prove it.
And
we'll
when you
test
look at
it.
And when you look at the prospect of, hey, let's just trade carbon for the rest of eternity and make money off of people having to do whatever they have to do and pay us, it's not viable to save the, climate change from carbon emissions by having such a setup, because it is simply a Band-Aid on a problem that cannot be solved. So yeah, that would actually solve it. Yeah, that would be a first principle thinking. But my thinking is, my question is really that when you pitch this idea of Astro Cool, you have to find people that is interested to, who does it benefit other than humanity?
Right, yeah, that's why we need to take this to the people ultimately and just get ask the general public, do you want this program to go forward or not? And that we can do that now with a little bit of the magic power of cryptography, which allows us to have a random sample of the global population that we can prove is actually random, and that all those participants' answers were reported correctly, and where we give out prizes and rewards to people for participating in a way that's provably not influencing their vote.
Let me offer a different framing here, just to be fair. Without the proper economics, we won't have these type of projects, right? So, identifying incentives are very important, but there's a balance. It's systemic, right? So they all have to work together to collectively create the right balance of complexity to be able to execute these amazing projects from brilliant minds like yourself. So that's the framing issue. Now, the second framing issue, I think it might be have a fallacy in it. It's in thinking that, we don't consider that we haven't evolved to look at big picture items as humans. We've evolved to look at micro dangers, right? Always looking out for that snake in the forest. So I think it's key. So when you frame out this, how do you get mass adoption to pay attention to projects like this? You won't. It's very difficult. So the challenge is to get adopters who have the let's say the influence to be able to activate these projects, support you with the right funding and government support to be able to execute. The first, viability, feasibility, prove that out with the white paper and the theoretical work, the mathematics, and then further into the second phase, which would be some sort of beginnings of action.
You're absolutely right, Fernando, and that's definitely a way forward, and we're pursuing that, and the extracting resources from the lunar dust complements that, and we are seeing a lot of support for these kind of initiatives. But I think Oscar's also right that it's there will be winners and losers if we can solve this global warming without a lot of the kind of stuff that's going on. And so but I think ultimately it's up to the general public to weigh in and say, look, enough of this. We see that this works. We saw the videos of the dust. It seems like it's blocking the light. We saw the science. We support it. That would cut through, all the barriers, and there have been a lot of problems with trying to get all these incentives lined up, and it's a bit of a stretch, really the economics that we've heard about. And we're talking about the lives of, billions of people. Don't forget, sub-Saharan Africa as subsistence agriculture would be wiped out by, 1 or 2 more degrees or something. And, the Indus Valley, there's almost 1 billion people live there. I mean, there are populations that are in, on the edge of I don't know that the global economy or the nation states and so on would be able to deal with something.
Well, I think why I'm so honored to be part of your project is that it is such exciting research that requires an answer. Can you do this? Whether you believe in climate change or not, this is an answer that is valuable to know.
Right. Well put. Yes, absolutely. I mean, this is totally justified as a basic science project, and the funding level and so on required is, well within. It's modest compared to a lot of. If you look at how much, NASA has spent, I think, several $1 trillion in its history, and if you go to the NASA website and look and see what they've contributed to society. They're always saying, oh, with all the spin-offs and all this. You go to the website and look at the list of actual things they claim they've contributed, and I'm afraid you're going to find Tang, which is fake orange juice, at the top of the list. Yeah, it's really true, but they didn't invent Tang. Tang existed, was a commercial product at least a year before NASA decided to make it famous by giving it to astronauts. Yeah, go ahead.
I think no, this is great. So I have we have collaborations that can truly testify on the sense of the innovation that's come out of NASA and is currently not being publicized. So it's pretty incredible. So what the surface level front-facing aspect of something doesn't necessarily determine the rear-facing. But just to give you just different contexts.
A lot of pure science, and it's not clear.
No, this is great. No, but I admire that the perspective. What are your parting thoughts on the future of
Some questions.
yeah? Oh, yes.
So, David, thank you for that introduction to the project. It's very exciting. Can I just ask one question, though? So I understand that you're going to give certain votes to the public on whether to do this, et cetera, et cetera. But how is your corporate governance then to kind of emulate what you're, you know what I mean? So is there a company set up, and then how is that set up to run in those same waters?
Thank you. Yes, well, so Astro Cool, you know, it is a corporation in the United States. It owns its own trademark. It's set up under a special corporate regime, actually, which is called the Public Benefit Corporation in Delaware, which has the most established corporate law in the United States, probably in the world, I think. And it's a special type of structure that's perfect for Astro Cool, because what it essentially says is that the board of Astro Cool can decide to do things that will benefit the public, right? It's a public benefit corporation. Benefit the public more than benefit the shareholders. And so that gives us the ability to, you know, accept donations, but also like make a profit and try to really focus on trying to save the planet. So it's not, you know, it sounds easy, but there's really no other corporate structure that would allow that if you really get into the details. So we were really delighted to find that, and thanks for asking. Yeah, so we're positioning this to really, you know, go the full distance.
That's amazing. So essentially then everyone doesn't have a reason not to support it, because the company is obligated to act in the best interest of the public.
That's right. You know, there are other structures that are just like democratically controlled, but they lack the kind of the proven track record and all this infrastructure. So I think this was a great. We're really happy with it's. You know, it's not widely used, but it turns out that it's perfectly well suited. So yeah, Astro Cool, by, you know, demonstrating support from the public, proving that the stuff works by these reasonable tests that are now, it looks like, will be funded by governments, and having the upside of being able to maybe find some valuable stuff on the moon and so on, and sort of with the idea that we're not, you know, going up against the conventional, you know, climate change community, but rather we're just making sure we can build some fire extinguishers in case we need to. I think it's you know, it's a very powerful and effective way to possibly save, you know, not only billions of lives, if you can say that, but also, you know, the rest of civilization might sort of be destroyed if it really comes to some kind of catastrophe like that. So I think it's an important mission. You have another question from the audience, I think.
Hi, David. Two questions. First question is, that dust, how much percentage do you think it's gonna cover the Earth from the sun? And second question is, you know, you said that the public will decide, which is usually is never the case. It's people with power, government with power, USA that decide.
Well, they haven't decided. Yeah. So, all right, I should wait till the microphone gets here. Well, thanks for your question. It was sort of like what percentage dust, and, you know, comment on the idea that, yeah, usually it's just the U.S. that decides things. So, well, let's just talk about the dust. That's a more clear cut. It's about, we have to block about 1.8% of the light, the visible light, the green light. And so it takes a 1.8% dense cloud about the size of Brazil to do it, placed there. But that's an oversimplification, because, you know, the Earth and the Moon move as with a special center of gravity, and so that, and then you have solar radiation pressure on the dust, so you have to kind of put the dust a little bit closer sun so that it pushes it, towards where we want it, et cetera, et cetera. But that's roughly what's involved. And yeah, I mean, I think the whole world suffers arguably from this short-term thinking, which I guess is kind of programmed into us. And you're selling the future short, and that's in some sense what the giant economic growth that we've had is all about over the so it has its good and its bad aspects, but when that approach carries over to not even figuring out how to build the fire extinguishers, then you're really in trouble. So I think this is right now an example that sort of steps outside of all those principles. Says, look, this is a very small thing. We could just do this. Government's willing to pay for it just on the basis of science, and this will really help us. So at this stage, I think we're safe. But in the next stage, yeah, if people really want to do this, because it just looks like there's not, that most of the fossil fuel is going to be burned up. I mean, that's certainly plausible. I'm sorry to have to say. Well, then we'll have the means to do it, and I think that'll become increasingly clear to the general public. And if they weigh in and say, look, we really want to fix this, and then that's going to have a very positive second order effect on civilization. And that's the thing that I get really excited about, because I'd really like to see the public pull together and say, okay, we're running this, we've got the power here, we're running this planet, and we can be consulted on some of these things, and that will be a real sea change for civilization. I thought that was a good closing note, but go ahead.
That was a really good closing note anyways. But I have a question. What is the timeline that you're looking at for Astro Cool? What stage are we in, and what are the milestones like? And what are we looking at? An approximate investment, the entire thing, full cycle.
Well, thanks. Yeah, so, I mean, it's an excellent question. And so we have like a 1-year time frame to get the experiments designed at the conceptual level and to build partnerships to get them deployed in space. But there's an intermediate step, which is what's sometimes referred to as mission architecture in the aerospace field. And it's a pretty expensive process that, most of Astro Cool is kind of volunteer. I've been paying for it. I mean, a lot of people have been helping me. But that's something you really have to pay for and takes a bit of time. So once we get the basic concepts figured out within the project, then we probably have to pay for that. And then in parallel, we're building partnerships with people who can easily put our CubeSats up on their, we can ride share with them for free, and that's way better than trying to put your own satellite up, because they can have very good, communication and so on. So that phase, so up to the point of proving viability, we may very well be able to do it. Okay, so mission cost, if we have to pay for this stuff, with just a couple $1 million, not much. But so that'll take us to the proof that we have the proof. And then, if you really want to deploy it, I can't say exactly, because that's what we're trying to figure out. But it's not 5 to 10 trillion a year. No, it really is. It's much less. Because we've been working on it. You got to keep chipping away and try to reduce the cost. So now we've got it to very little actual amount of hardware that's needed. So the investment's very modest. So if it turns out there's a fusion engine that has high thrust, and there's some candidates, and that becomes practical, then, I mean, this is UAE could cool the planet for the rest of the world. It become payable here, so it's not, yeah. But then if you invest in that, you stand to gain from, if you find, all this rare earths and platinum and all these, isotopes. And there's another aspect to Astro Cool, which I think we should close, but just mention briefly. It's not necessarily a zero-sum game or a kind of, winner-take-all kind of a thing. It's a lot of dust that we have to move there. And so if different portions of the world want to each contribute and put some of the dust there, then you get a decentralized and much more robust process. So if one country can't say, oh, we're going to hold the world hostage, we're going to stop doing this, no. You can have a number, because it's, you're putting dust in a place that's as big as Brazil. So several different groups can be moving the dust there. So that's a beautiful thing about the project. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Thanks.
Hello. Actually, I practice space law. So, yes. So, are you in with the Moon Village Association, because they are working very, very like they're doing amazing thing related to helping the commercial startups who are into this. This is number one that I wanted to ask you, because I am in the working group with them for some activities. The second question is, I think you've been in the era of the old space, or which is not the new space. And my question, because I work with a lot of startups and governmental entities and everything related to the activities, and my question to ask you, because your project or what you are doing is very disruptive, and the question exactly, and it's not just firing some rockets and sending satellites; it's something beyond that. The question is, do you feel the change in the ecosystem coming with the off-the-shelf technology and the economy of scale and all this that makes your projects feasible and very timelined comparing to the previous startups who we saw them before this boom of space technology?
Right. Yes. Well, yeah. So we do have. I left out. We have members in the project who are involved in the Moon DAO and all, developing software for making habits on the moon and so on now. So we're working with all these. It's one big happy kind of community. But yeah, I think that as was mentioned, I mean, this is a kind of, I would call it a clean kill. Sorry for the metaphor, but I mean, this is a way to solve global warming that sort of, leaves a lot of other approaches in the dust, if you will. So, my apologies, but I put my own effort, my own money, my own time into opportunity costs, trying to figure out a way to do this, and that my concern was not to make sure that everybody who's been working on this is fully employed, with their, because they can keep on keeping on. I was just trying to solve the problem, and that's the solution that I've come up with. But I do think, to your final point, which is really is the essence of Astro Cool, actually, is that we're I don't know what the exact metaphor would be, but something like we're trying to make sure we know how to build fire extinguishers, and we're testing them because someday people will have buildings made out of wood, and then they'll need the fire extinguishers. So we're predicated on the cislunar economy and these rockets actually working, and we're not playing favorites. We're saying, well, you know, Elon can do it with methane, or the other guys can do it with hydrogen, you know, like they did in the first place, or it could be with, you know, fission or fusion, and there are a lot of variations there, you know, or different groups could do it with different kinds of rockets. You know, we're agnostic. We're just saying, like, you know, at some point there will be ways to move a lot of stuff in space, and so we're gearing up so that when that capability exists and people start to feel the pain of global warming at an excruciating level, you know, we're ready to rock. Yeah.
What a great note to end on. We're ready to rock, and I will never get a chance to say this ever again in my life. We need to end here because I'm heading over to the Atlantis to pick up David Hasselhoff, who will be here in 90 minutes. So you think I'm joking? I'm not joking. It's Fernando's neighbor. So you better stick around, and we're going to have a very small, exclusive party here, and we're going to save the world from climate change once and for all. Yeah!